Hello viewers, I'm George Hibernensis. Today I'm going to talk about the 1848 revolution in Italy, and this will assist those of you who are studying that topic for History A-level about Italian unification. What precipitated the 1848 revolution? Well, there have been a series of bad harvests, not just in Italy, but around Europe. That's why there was a famine in Ireland in the 1840s. So there were food riots in many cities. There was partly that. There was also an intellectual ferment. Some Italian nationalists had been spreading their ideas and felt the time was strike to try and unite Italy on a liberal or even a radical basis, with sweeping political change, power taken away from hereditary rulers and given to the propertied classes, or maybe even to the working class, with the Catholic Church losing its power to control non-religious affairs. So some people felt the time was ripe for that change. Remember, Italy was about 24 states, which were more or less independent countries, except for the few of the northern states, which were Austrian-dominated, having dukes who were loyal to the Emperor of Austria. Pius IX had become Pope in 1846, seen as a liberal pope, had released political prisoners, created a council of state to assist him in ruling the papal states. Remember, the Pope ruled central Italy. Central Italy comprised several states, all ruled by cardinals sent there by the Pope. A cardinal is a very, very senior priest. So this created a lot of expectation of further liberal reform by the Pope. Anyway, revolution was in the air, not just in Italy, but around Europe, and even in Uruguay. In January 1848, there was a rebellion in Sicily. Sicily was part of the kingdom of the two Sicilies, not just the island of Sicily, but the mainland around Naples. King Ferdinand II was deeply unpopular. The government was thought to be incorrupt, ineffectual. Sicilians often saw themselves as a separate nationality. Ferdinand II rapidly lost control of the island of Sicily, and the rebellion spread to the mainland, to Naples and Salerno. Austria was ruling northern Italy. Lombardy in north-central Italy was very fertile and very lucrative for Austria in terms of tax revenues. Milan was the main city of Lombardy. Tobacco tax was increased. Most men smoked in those days, so many Italians who disliked being part of the Austrian Empire stopped smoking as a way of committing a tax strike, so that Vienna wouldn't get any money out of them. Austrian soldiers were ordered to go around smoking as flamboyantly as they could to try and tempt people into buying tobacco. Anyway, so rebellion broke out in Milan, which was a hotbed of radical agitation. There were 100,000 Austrian troops in northern Italy. Now, when I say Austrian, that meant that they served the Austrian Empire. Often they weren't ethnically Austrian or didn't speak German. The Austrian Empire was much of Central Europe. I won't go through all of it, but it included what we now call Hungary, Czechoslovakia, southern Poland, a bit of Romania, Croatia, Slovenia, and so on, and Italy as well. So many of the Austrian troops were of other nationalities, but still part of the Austrian Empire. And Italian revolutionaries wrongly believed that a lot of the Austrian army would mutiny. Italian nationalists also supported Polish nationalism at this time. Anyway, so General Radetzky was the Austrian commander in Milan. He was forced to withdraw his 20,000 troops from Milan. The Austrians had a series of forts called the Quadrilateral, which is outside Milan, in various towns nearby, and the soldiers withdrew to these forts, quadrilateral, as in four sides, four mutually supporting forts. There was also revolution in Austria at the time. The Austrian Chancellor Metternich, he resigned, and that was greeted with a great acclaim by liberals throughout Europe. Sardinia Piedmont was the island of Sardinia and the very northwest corner of Italy. It was ruled by King Charles Albert. He had just promulgated a liberal constitution, giving the right to vote to propertied classes, saying he was going to share power with Parliament, there'd be greater freedom for expression, there'd be fair trials, and so on. And his Prime Minister was Count Camillo di Cavour, who was also pushing for greater reform, not just in Piedmont, but throughout Italy, and unification on the basis of a constitutional monarchy. like the UK. So Piedmont declared war on Austria and attacked the Quadrilateral. Tuscany, another Italian state, joined this effort. So did the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. Ferdinand changed completely. And even the Papal States. The Pope was going to war against Austria. The Pope had his own army. It was called the Pontifical Army at the time. So they attacked the Quadrilateral without success. They stormed one fort called Pescara, but they didn't capture the other three. Then the Pope got cold feet about it, withdrew. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and Tuscany also pulled out of the alliance. So then there was the Battle of Novara, and Piedmont was defeated by the Austrian army. Let me see. In Venice, there'd been a revolution as well, and the Austrians lay siege to Venice. Not much outside help came to the Italian nationalists in Venice. Then June 1848 was the Battle of Custoza, and Piedmont was heavily defeated by Austria and knocked out of the war. Charles Albert had to give up his dream of uniting Italy under his rule on a liberal basis. So the Kingdom of Two Sicilies and the Papal States had turned to supporting Austria. The Pope was worried this was getting out of hand. Moreover, he felt it was wrong to divide the Catholic world. Most people in the Austrian Empire were Catholics as well, and he mustn't take sides in this sort of dispute. It was perhaps a bit too political, and he was frightened by the way the revolution was going from a liberal to a radical direction, and he felt that that threatened the Catholic Church too much. Then in November 1848 there was a revolution in Rome, just as the revolution in northern Italy had been defeated. Pellegrino Rossi, who was the Pope's minister, prime minister really, was assassinated. The Pope fled Rome. A Roman Republic was declared. Giuseppe Garibaldi, perhaps the most radical of Italian revolutionaries, he took power there. His friend Giuseppe Mazzini was with him. So the Pope went to Gaeta, which is a fortress. Ferdinand II and the Grand Duke of Tuscany also sought shelter there. Let me see, Charles Albert in Sardinia, Piedmont, he abdicated. He gave up the throne in favour of his son, Victor Emmanuel II, and they'd lost some territory to Austria. So the Roman Republic was the last radical state left in Italy at that stage. Then the Austrians were going to attack it. The French sent troops. There'd been a French Revolution then, won't go into it. But Napoleon III was ruling France at the time. That's Napoleon the Great's nephew. Napoleon III wasn't calling himself Napoleon III at the time. He was calling himself President Bonaparte, but I won't get sidetracked there. Anyway, Napoleon III, he was wanting Catholic conservative support, so he recognised that reinstalling the Pope as the secular ruler of Rome would play well with a lot of traditional-minded people in France. Anyway, the Roman Republic had been very radical. They'd introduced prison and asylum reform. They'd allowed a completely free press. They brought in secular education, that's to say, with no religious element. Land reform, breaking up big estates. The church owned huge amounts of land and sharing out amongst the peasants. They significantly didn't go for the right to work. France had briefly experimented with national workshops, and it was felt to have bankrupted the country. Nevertheless, the Roman Republic suffered from hyperinflation. So the French and Austrians attacked in the summer of 1849. General Oudinot sailed from France. They easily defeated the revolutionary forces in Rome. A lot of Romans who'd welcomed the revolution the year before were fed up of things and felt that it caused great hardship. So the Roman Republic was crushed, and Mazzini and Garibaldi managed to flee. And many Romans, they welcomed the Pope back. When he came back in the summer of 1849, order and normality had been restored. So the revolution was defeated. Why? Partly division, as in geographical division, partly some of the key states changing sides, supporting Austria. People who felt that the revolution was perilous to them, and liberals had to choose between ultimately supporting radicals or conservatives, and too many liberals turning to the conservative side. Austria remained quite potent. Austrian troops were more loyal than Italian revolutionaries had believed them to be. So too many people wanted different things, and perhaps we overestimate support for the revolution. Most people were quite callow, if not quite content, simply accepted the situation and weren't desperate for such sweeping change. That's enough for today.